Frank Warren and Queensbury demolish Matchroom in the 5v5 tournament. 10-0. 5 fights out of 5 won by Queensbury. What do I know? I think I only got 2 fights out of the 5v5 right. I got the Bivol fight right and 2 fights of the 5v5. Let me just make this disclaimer. I watched this event with a group of friends and they had already, well, not even they had already, I was the only one who didn't want to turn over to the Champions League final that was on at the same time as the beginning of the fight. I only got to watch the first 7 rounds of Richards versus Hutchinson, which was the first fight, and I only got to watch the first 2 or maybe 3 rounds of the Nick Bull and Ray Ford fight. So let me just put that out there straight away. Champions League final was excellent. Real Madrid won 2-0, beat Borussia Dortmund 2-0 on the night. Brilliant game of football. But let's get back to these fights. From what I saw of the Richards versus Hutchinson fight, who I picked Richards to win. I picked Spider Richards to win. Hutchinson, from what I saw, first round, it was a evenish round. I edged it to Hutchinson just purely based on more output than Richards, who was started tentatively, very slow. Second round, I definitely gave to Hutchinson. He landed a good few shots, moving well around the ring. He seemed to be like a little slickster, switch hitting, southpaw, orthodox. I was quite impressed. Spider let me down. He was just not throwing any punches. Come the second, third, fourth, first 5 rounds, while Spider's being hesitant and tentative, Hutchinson is just becoming more and more comfortable, switch hitting, varying his shot selection, body, head, looking very, very sharp, looking very, very confident, looking very, very comfortable, clearly winning the first 5 rounds. The 6th round, Richards put out a lot more effort, started to throw a lot more shots, and he, for me, won that 6th round, looking a bit more aggressive. Hutchinson held his own, but he did lose that round. And the 7th round, I gave that as a swing round. At this point, Champions League started. First half came and went. It was an eventful 0-0, and we turned it back. And Richards versus Hutchinson had finished, and it was the beginning of Nick Bull versus Raymond Ford. I didn't know at the time what the result was, but as the fight began, the graphic came up saying it was 1-0 to Queensbury. So obviously Hutchinson won. I don't know if he won convincingly. I don't know if he continued to dominate for the rest of the fight or if Craig grabbed back a few rounds. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the cards. I'm not going to until I give the full recap of what I personally saw. The first 4 rounds, or first 3 rounds actually, of Nick Ball versus Raymond Ford, it looked very much like Nick Ball had a fantastic engine. I was wondering how long can he keep this up, because he was like he was throwing about 300 punches around. It was like he was throwing about 300 punches around. Good selection of shots as well. Raymond Ford was doing a lot of covering up and trying to pick off Nick Ball with shots from all different angles. And although they were landing, Nick Ball seemed to just walk through the shots from what I could see in the first 3 rounds. 4 rounds actually I think I got to. But by that time, the second half of the Champions League was on. Switched back to the Champions League, watched the rest of the Champions League, switched back. My favourite fight of the night, I didn't even get to watch it. But I found out that Raymond Ford lost to Nick Ball, who is the new WBA featherweight champion. They're saying it was a very close fight. I went with Raymond Ford because this is his first title defense. And they say that when you become champion, you increase by 30% in terms of your confidence and just the way you carry yourself. And this gives you another 30% of yourself. What I did take into account, though, is the fact that Nick Ball lost gallantly against Ray Vargas. And he was said to have won that fight by many people. Most people in boxing thought that he won that fight. So with that being said, I wasn't really sure who was going to win this fight. I knew it was going to be a great fight. I just went with Raymond Ford because I believed that it was going to be close, and I thought if it was going to be close, they're going to swing it to the champion. But it seems like Shake's got some good judges that just go by what they see and done. at the end of the day, it was a great fight. Apparently, I need to go and watch it when it's released. I've only seen the highlights. I want to see the whole full fight. Anyway, moving on. The next fight is the first fight that I saw in its actual entirety. Hamza Shiraz versus Amo Williams. Now, first round, I gave to Shiraz. Commanding the first round. Ring generalship. Great shot selection from the orthodox stance. Williams was southpaw, and he was struggling to deal with the orthodox stance. In the second round, Shiraz was doing well, but Amo caught him with a nice overhand left that sent him off balance, and Amo went on a little attack. Shiraz covered up well and defended himself well, but I gave that round to Amo Williams. The third round I gave to Shiraz. Well, I gave that as a swing round, but I gave it to Shiraz because he just had the cleaner work and he couldn't miss that with that jab. Amo had no head movement and he was just cracking him with that jab constantly. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th round, I'm giving them all to Shiraz. And at the end of the day, it was a TKO victory for Shiraz in the 11th. He dropped Williams and then finished him off with a good shot selection, and the referee came in and stopped the fight. Amo ended up finishing the fight on his feet, but it was a TKO victory for Shiraz. Now he's now calling out Chris Eubanks Jr., which he should do. We should do that. I would love to see that fight. As for Amo, he lives to fight another day. He's got a lot to work on. He showed his deficiencies in this fight. He showed what he's lacking. He can go back to the drawing board, work on his craft, and we hope to see Amo in the future because we rate Amo over here. The next fight was Bivol versus Zinad. Zinad came out looking quite sharp, throwing his jab. He had his lead hand held low and he was throwing the jab out. He was taller than Bivol, looked bigger than Bivol. But come the end of the first round, Bivol dropped him with a lovely shot. It was a left, right, left, and he dropped him. That was a 10-8 round for Bivol. Now, Zinad had a longer reach than Bivol, but Bivol was doing this thing where he was parrying the jab with his backhand while he jabbed himself. And while he was doing that in the second round, parrying Zinad's jab and jabbing with his own jab, he ended up busting Zinad's nose. Everything Zinad was throwing, he was throwing some combos, but it was all coming off of the glove of Bivol. Off the gloves of Bivol, who had a high guard, but he didn't just block up too much. He made sure he had output, very effective output, which was really doing some damage to Zinad's face, his nose in particular. Third round was quite the same. Bivol parrying Zinad's jab and jabbing himself. Little left rights here and there. Nice 2-3 punch combinations. Very accurate. Fourth round, Zinad done better. I gave that a 10-10 round. Zinad done a lot better, making a fight of it. But I believe that Bivol kind of took his foot off the gas a bit in that round. Because come off the fifth round, he is just the ring general, dominating the ring. And by the sixth round, he's knocking him out. It was a TKO victory for Bivol in the sixth round. Shot selection perfect. As he got Zinad hurt, he went in for an attack, and the attack was very accurate. A lot of shots, a lot of accuracy, and the ref stepped in and said, "That's enough, mate. You've had enough. Live to fight another day." The Sheikh was very impressed with Zinad and promised him another fight in a card later on down in the year. So this is what can happen. You can have a good display in your fight, in a loss, and still come out with some sort of victory. In this case, Zinad has impressed the Sheikh, and he is guaranteed another fight down the line, down the end of the year, sometimes in October or so. Can't remember when he said, but he's promised another fight. So Bivol moves on and prepares himself again for his undisputed fight, which the Sheikh announced will be happening in October, I believe. But that's another story. Bivol wins and retains his WBO championship, and Zinad lives to fight another day. Moving on to the Dubois versus Hrgovic fight. And in the first two rounds, Hrgovic looked quite dominant with a good jab and a good 1-2 selection that kept on catching Daniel Dubois. He couldn't miss with it. He could not miss with the 1-2. Pat, 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 pat. And by the third round, Dubois was being very bullish and being very rough and rugged, leading with his head a lot. He ended up cutting Hrgović with a headbutt, the head clash in the third round. But it wasn't maliciously done. It just caused the head clash. The head clash caused the cut. And the cut, it was like under the eyebrow of Hrgovic's right eye. It started bleeding profusely straight away, and it was very uncomfortable for Hrgović going forward from there. So the third and the fourth round I gave to Dubois with just more, because he had a good shot selection as well. No, good work rate, a very good work rate. His jab wasn't the best, but he was throwing a lot of aggressive hooks, and he was up and under, body shot, head shots, and he was catching Hrgović. It was rough house. It wasn't as clean as how Hrgović was catching Dubois, but he did win the rounds. The fifth round, Hrgović, by this time, he was cut on both eyes, but he did win the fifth round with better shot selection, but he was slowing down visibly. He couldn't push Dubois back anymore, and from the first 2-3 rounds, actually, he couldn't push Dubois back. Even though he was catching Dubois clean, the shots seemed to be somewhat bouncing off of Dubois. He was taking the shots very well. So I'm not sure if it was Hrgovic's lack of power or Dubois' shot resistance. But at the end of the day, Usyk stopped him, and so did Joe Joyce, who I liken Joe Joyce a lot to Hrgović. The added caveat for Joe Joyce is that Dubois had a busted eye, which helped the fight to be stopped. So that worked in his favor. In this situation, Hrgović didn't have that. He was the one with the eyes cut, both eyes cut at this point. The seventh round, I gave to Dubois because of work rate, and by this time, this blooded situation, he was bleeding profusely from both eyes. It was a bloody mess. He was all over the place, Hrgović, and he had no real energy left to try and stop the onslaught that was coming from Dubois. And in the eighth round, halfway into the eighth round, I think it was a minute into the eighth round, the referee took him over to the doctor, and the doctor said, no more of this, stop the fight. So Dubois ended up beating Hrgović on cuts in the eighth round. Now, Dubois seems to be the one that's going to go on to now fight Anthony Joshua. We'll talk about that later on down in another video. Moving on, going into Wilder versus Zhang. This fight started off in round one, very tentative from both fighters, feeling out each other, trying to see where they could find an opening. Wilder more on the back foot, Zhang more on the front foot, but very little in terms of output from both fighters, so I gave that a 10-10 round. The second round I gave to Zhang based on work rate and finding the target more so than Wilder. Wilder kept on backing up into the corners, and Zhang, while he had him in the corners, he would let off a barrage of punches. Wilder was doing well to not really be hit by many of the shots, or if they did catch him, they were grazing shots. They didn't catch flush, so he was doing well in that sense, but he was losing the rounds. The same thing in the third round. Zhang had better shot selection, caught Wilder a few times with some big shots, but Wilder held on also in that round. The fourth round I gave to Wilder. He became a bit more confident and started throwing that right hand a bit more, caught Zhang a few times, pushed him back a bit, and subsequently won that round on work rate. But cometh the fifth round, Wilder, fully confident now, pushing forward, walks into a right hook from Zhang's southpaw stance, and it catches him in a way what makes him spin round. He was dizzy, didn't know where he was, and he actually spun round, like tried to point at the ref, like, ref, did you see that? Did you see what man just done? He pointed at the ref. Sorry to laugh, Wilder, but man pointed at the ref like to say, yo, well, God, where am I? Are you here? Am I fighting you? Well, he was out of there. He had no chance to recover. Zhang pounced on him and threw another right hook straight to the chin. Wilder was out sleeping. Total KO And that was the end of that. All Queensbury fighters winning their fights and now have the bragging rights over Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. But the fact of the matter is, it was a great night of boxing. It was a fantastic card, and long may this continue. So, tell me what you guys thought of these fights, your breakdown of the fights. What was your favorite fight of the night? Let's talk about it. And I will see you in the next video.